So a couple of weeks ago I posted up some pictures of this axe. Now the head on it at the time was a little bit wobbly, so what I was looking at was different ways that we could reset the head. Now one of the methods is that you can soak the head and the handle in oil, and the oil will absorb into the handle and plump up the wood fibres and hopefully lock it back on. Unfortunately this axe handle's a little bit too far gone for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to refit a new handle to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip the head off, refit a new handle, and then I'll show you it all at the end. But yeah, I'll take you some pictures of the process and go through it with you from there. As you can see, the handle, might not be able to see it here, but has got a little bit of wobble in it. So my fear is that obviously as it wobbles and takes impact, that's going to worsen, and eventually you can end up with a loose head that breaks away. So we've nearly got the head off. It's literally just going to pull off by hand now, but we've used a wooden mallet and just a little piece of wood just to drift it out. So drilled the wedge out, basically picked it out with a pair of pliers. The steel wedge, as you can see, was pretty busted up, so when we do the rehandle kit we're going to do the full handle. We've saved most of the handle, which is quite good, so if we wanted to take a smaller axe and use this handle and recycle it again, we could do. I mean, the reason why I didn't just fit a new wedge was we've got a crack in the handle here, which for me, I might as well, if I'm getting a handle kit, use the whole kit, make it as good as new. But yeah, we're going to take this off and then we'll go on to refit the head. Right, so we're at the fitting stage. So we've got our handle, and what I've done with the eye of the axe is I've actually run a cloth through it just to clean any debris out of it. Last thing we want is bits of old sawdust that are going to affect the fit, because you want as much of that axe handle touching as much of the inside of the eye as possible. Now I have just had a quick feel, and it will push up quite well. So this head is quite a good fit already, so I don't need to take much off, but you might need to just sand it down a little. And all we're going to do is just with a wooden mallet just start to drive it on. Okay, so at the moment we've got nothing showing above. Now what I like to do is I like to have probably 1/4 of an inch, 6mm showing above, and the reason for that is that if the fit of the axe head should change, we can then check that and change it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this up, because you've got this indentation here on the head, and that allows me to really start to drive this head through and get a good fit. Now as well, my ash mallet and my poplar block are softer than the hickory of the handle, and they're definitely softer than the steel. What I don't want to be doing is using something like a steel hammer, something like this, to be fitting our wooden component, because that's going to damage the wooden components. And what I've got now is I've got this nice little bit here above the head, and then what I want to do, I'm going to take my wooden wedge and I'm going to look at it, the size, and the size on the eye is a pretty good fit. So what I want to do is just gently start to drive that down. I'm actually going to start ever so slightly towards the rear, just because of where the gap is. clever with your wedge is you can just level it up. So what you want to do is make sure that your wedge is sat so that it'll drive in. And what I'm actually going to do with that wedge, and I'll bring it close to the camera so you can see. That wedge is sitting ever so slightly to the side of the eye. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim a few millimetres off that wedge and then come back to you with it. Right, so what I've done is I've just taken a trim off that side of the wedge, just with a sharp knife. It doesn't need a lot. It's just brought it so that this now sits in the middle of the eye. And what I've done is as well, I've taped it ever so slightly so it's slightly wider at the top than it is at the bottom. But only fractionally, we're talking maybe a millimetre's difference. So what I'm going to do now, so I'm driving our wedge down, and there's zero movement in that head now compared to what it was. Right, so that, and I'll come back to the camera. That is our wedge fitted. Didn't take a lot because this handle is so tight on there. There's going to be zero movement in that at all. It's now solid and tight. So what I'm now going to do is take a saw, just trim that flush, and then we'll fit our steel wedge. Right, so we've got that cut off flush. I've just given it a quick sand just to make it nice and smooth. So thing is, it's if you're gonna do this job, spend a little bit of time, get some sandpaper, just sand it in, make it nice and flush, and then when it comes to fitting your steel wedge, so this is our new steel wedge that comes with the kit. So Gransfors don't always have a steel wedge in them now from the factory. If you get a Rehandle kit, you will get a steel wedge with it, because the handle, when they fit it in the factory, what they say is that it should be, basically their factory fit should be good enough that it should never fail. And what you want to do as well is just check around, make sure all your areas are nice and tight up. So there's a tiny little gap there. I'm not too fussed about that. It's nice and tight at the back. That gap, to be honest, I'll whack some oil in that. That'll probably soak up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fit my wedge at an angle, and then that way it'll lock in just ever so slightly better, I feel. So this is where your metal hammer comes in, okay? This is the only time you really use a metal hammer to fit anything on an axe. Just start it, get the prongs in. Now, don't go overboard with your impacts. And there's our steel wedge fitted. That is now right and tight. There's absolutely no slack in that. And as I say, our old handle, to be honest, you might be able to cut that back and shorten the handle down, use it on a different axe. I don't know what else you'd do with it really, maybe keep it for a bit of nostalgia, but you can always try and recycle it. The wedge is not too badly damaged. You know, I've not gone too deep down with the drill when I've drilled it out. That is our Gransfors Bruks large carving axe. It's a model 475, so on the handle wrapping it notes down 475. That's just the model axe it is. So I will give this a quick wipe of oil, get it back in the sheath, and then get it out carving again.